Welcome to our open book. Very good to be with you. And we are, hello there, Elizabeth Shreve. Hi there, S.R. O'Brien. Hi there, Ed McShane, Mr. Dickens, Carla Atkinson, Diana Lynch, Mary Glazer, Barbara at Project, and Andrea Elizabeth Mitchell, Joe Denny. We are talking to a very distinguished author who is several time zones away. She is in Ireland. Betsy Cornwell has written I think I can call it a fierce and touching memoir. Uh, it's called Ring of Salt, and it's personal and also has steps towards recovery. So, in any event, let me firstly welcome Betsy. Thank you very much for being. Is that a tree I see behind you? A
It
light?
is. We have our Christmas tree here in Ireland. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what's going on and off. It's very nice. Um,
Will you show your cup?
oh, I should show my. This is
Oh,
well.
oh, brilliant.
This was the Santa Claus cup I had as a little boy. You see
Oh
on
my
the
gosh.
side.
Oh, Patty. Yeah, that's
It
wonderful.
says Scotty. Yeah. Oh, thank you, darling. Yeah, and it holds a double espresso, which I used to have as a
I
teen.
was gonna say, is that what you drank as a little boy?
Yeah, yeah. They my mother would say double espresso for my son. Um, look, I we have to begin obviously. There's a lot of pain in this story. 24, you went to Ireland and fell in love.
Mhm.
What happened?
Yeah, I came to Ireland 13 years ago now when I was 24. I had just finished my master's degree in creative writing at the University of Notre Dame, and I had had a very close miss at a Fulbright scholarship to come to Ireland to study selkies, which are sort of Celtic versions of mermaids. They're seals that can turn into people. And I had sold my first novel, which is a young adult novel about selkies. So I came to Ireland to do some research, but I really also, as I talk about in the memoir, was trying to get some space and some distance from my family of origin, and so I came to the west of Ireland and I started doing help exchange at a youth hostel on the Aran Islands, and I pretty quickly fell in love with a charming Irish horse trainer and ended up eloping. So I first came to Ireland to stay for about 2 months, but I'm still here 13 years later. So that's kind of what the book is about. Yeah. So,
Well, I have to ask what happened.
yeah. So, right, like I said, I fell in love with an Irish man, and we eloped a year after we met. And then about 3 years after we got married, we had a child. And I was so thrilled to move to Ireland. I was very much in love with my husband, and I was really happy to, as I said, to get some distance from my family of origin, who were pretty abusive. So the title "Ring of Salt" of my book, the first thing that refers to, is the Atlantic Ocean that I put between my family of origin in the United States and myself in Ireland. And but unfortunately, my marriage became abusive as well. I found myself in an emotionally abusive situation, which only sort of became more extreme after we had a child. And one of the reasons that I wanted to write this book is because I eventually learned that a lot of relationships become more controlling or more abusive only after a child is born, which can make it a lot harder to leave. And so I think my highest goal for this book, and I mean, I know you're right, there's a lot of painful things that I talk about in this book, but to me, it is a happy story with a happy ending. And I wanted to offer that to, I think my ideal reader is someone else who's gone through something similar, and that they might relate to it, or sort of it might help them see a path into a different kind of life.
Yeah. And there are many people who go through it, even if
Absolutely.
they don't always acknowledge it or talk about it. And
Absolutely.
maybe they'll find some solace in this. So you went out on your own path. Tell us about the knitting factory.
Yeah, so I'm calling now from a historic knitting factory in Connemara in the west of Ireland. So it was built in 1906, and in this very room behind me, young women would knit sweaters like the Aran sweaters that are famous from this area, or knit lace. And so when I found the knitting factory, it was sort of in the context of when I left my marriage with my baby. We didn't have a home at first to go to. We went to a domestic violence center. We stayed with a friend for a while. and I was sort of scraping by at rentals that I couldn't really afford. There's a pretty acute housing crisis in Ireland right now. That's really only gotten worse since I experienced that time. And I started fantasizing about homeownership really intensely. And when my baby woke me up at night to nurse, I would sort of soothe myself back to sleep by reading real estate listings for houses I couldn't afford. And I know I'm not the only person who
I was
who
about
does
to say,
that.
I've heard,
Yeah.
yes,
And I would just fantasize about all these houses. And eventually I found, I mean, this is all sort of covered at greater length in the book, but to make a long story short, eventually I found this knitting factory, which was built in 1906. And by the time I came across it, was a very little used vacation home that had been on the market for years without a sale. And so I wrote to the owner and offered to rent to own it for a while and try to raise the funds to purchase it. And so the whole, I think to me, the book, the memoir Ring of Salt, is sort of divided in half. And the first half is about coming to Ireland and then entering into and leaving my marriage. And then the second half of the book is kind of about finding myself as a single mom, finding community, and finding a home here at the old knitting factory. So I again, to make a long story short, I crowdfunded the purchase of the knitting factory, the house I'm in right now, over the course of about a year and a half, and am now renovating it to turn it into a childcare inclusive residency space for my fellow single parents, which is, it really has become the work of my heart. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and it's a long project. It is a lot of work, but I'm really proud of it.
an especially sharp literary critic has just written on Substack. It's about knitting your future.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Um, should I ask S.R. O'Brien's question?
Yes, of course.
Did Irish people healing from many forms of trauma of their own help you on your journey?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think I'm not sure if that's a question about Irish history, because there's a lot of trauma in the history of Ireland as a country, of course. And I think even the history of the knitting factory, this building, to me has become kind of a microcosm of that history. And I am, I learn more about Irish history all the time, but I'm still am kind of cautious of speaking with authority on it as an American, as someone who has lived here for 13 years and is an Irish citizen now. But I'm always a little cautious of saying anything too definitive. But so basically, the knitting factory was marketed on this real estate website as essentially a place that had been built as a charity, almost a charity school, to teach rural women knitting skills that they could learn to survive and to support themselves financially. And I found that very romantic as a single mom who was looking to support myself financially, that I really resonated with that concept. But after I moved here and started doing some more research, I learned that the knitting factory was built by the Congested Districts Board for Ireland, which is a branch of the UK's Conservative Party, and their own stated goal, in their own words, was to kill home rule with kindness, home rule being Irish self-governance. And so they thought, if we create these social programs, then Irish people will think, well, why would we ever want independence from Britain? Look at all the lovely things they do for us. And that really resonated with me, because I recognized it so deeply from my own personal experience with domestic violence and coercive control. And I really saw parallels between the ways that the individuals will wield power over someone through providing for them, through doing something that seems really kind, but that is actually a form of control. And I really saw the parallels between how that works on a personal level and on a more societal level. And it was really interesting to me to read about that. And in the time since, I've actually gotten to meet some women who worked here at the knitting factory when they were younger, which has been fascinating. And for some of them, it was a job that gave them their own money for the first time in their lives, and was a positive thing for them. So I think it's a complicated history, but isn't all of history. So yeah.
Tell me about the renovation, because I was heartened to see that you think there are life lessons in renovation.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the first lesson that I've learned about it is that, you can have all the kind of passion and drive that you want, but things still do take time. And I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from first crowdfunding the knitting factory and then from doing these renovations is just sort of refusal to give up is probably the most important thing. It took me, and it's sort of just dealing with um, a, a bunch of kind of administrative nonsense. There's been so much more of that involved in the renovation than I expected. Like we live in a pretty remote area of the west of Ireland, and even just organizing and getting builders and contractors who will come out here and who will make it happen has been a huge project. And I'm a business owner now. I run a small business here at the Knitting Factory, and my whole life I wanted to be a writer and an artist, and the business owner hat is not something I was ever comfortable with. But again, I think every single mom I know will play whatever card she needs to play in order to support her kid, and so I'm still not comfortable with the idea of being a business owner. It scares me and stresses me out a lot of the time, but it is something that I'm proud of myself for sort of pushing through on. I think that's what I've learned from it so far.
I mean, there is just there's no bureaucratic
Yeah.
regulation in the United States, right? When it comes
Sure.
to yeah, no, I mean, very, very little. Um, it's the holiday season.
Mhm.
How do you feel about family?
Yeah. Well, I'm here now. I actually am spending Christmas with my child who's 8 now and who's doing wonderfully. Thankfully, he's a baby for most of the book, so I think people are sometimes surprised to hear what a big kid he is now. And his godfather is staying with us for Christmas, and that's someone who is a major character, as it were, in the memoir. And the reason that I wanted to include him so prominently is, our relationship started as a romantic relationship, and I now think of him as, or I know that he is found family for myself and for my kid, and here we are, a while on from having been involved romantically, and we're still very close, and he's still very much involved in my child's life, and he's the man that my child has the most interaction with and looks up to the most, and so I really value that. And at the same time, I'm not in touch with my parents anymore, which is a decision that I made pretty early on in the course of the events that I talk about in the memoir. The last time I spoke to them, I was 25. And I do know, I feel pretty calm and solid about that decision. I know that I'm protecting my child from people who caused me a lot of harm and who I feel like could have caused my child a lot of harm. But I'm still in touch with plenty of my extended family, and I value those relationships. I think family actually, I think, it can be surprising for someone who's cut off their parents to say family's really important to me, but I do feel that way, and I make sure to prioritize uh, my child's relationship with the found family people in our lives, especially.
Yeah, and your son's been through a lot in 8 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I struggled with even how much to write about him in the book, because, and that's something that I talked a lot about with writer friends of mine, because, right, he's still 8 years old. He's not old enough to consent really to being depicted, and I don't show his face on my public social media and things like that. I was very lucky to have, when I was in the early stages of working on this book, I was very lucky to get to talk to two good friends whose parents are writers and have been writers since they were very young. And especially because I'm not close with my parents, I was really struggling with the idea of writing about my child, even though I've always written for a living and I kind of knew that I needed to write this book to provide for him. But they both said to me something that I found really comforting, which is that they both said that they love to look back at the writing their parents did about them when they were little kids, that it
Mm.
helped them to see how much their parents loved them and to see themselves through their parents' eyes. And I thought that was so wonderful and beautiful. And so I tried to keep a line with myself where I didn't write anything that I thought he would find embarrassing later, but yeah, I hope, and honestly, I hope he doesn't read this book until he's a grown up, if ever. But I hope if he does, that he sees that I love him in it. That's my hope. Yeah. So.
I Our daughters have never read any of my books, have they?
Right. I mean, this is the thing. I don't know if
They read their names in the acknowledgments or the dedication,
totally.
and that's enough for them, and so they're right. May I ask, without putting you on the spot, is there a novel in the pipeline?
I'm lucky to have some ghostwriting work that I'm really excited about right now. So I can't talk about that too specifically, but it's been, I think, so I have 6 young adult novels that came out before this book, which is my first adult work and my first nonfiction book. And I was surprised by not that it felt different to write memoir. I think my fiction has always been like I think like most fiction is quite emotionally honest. So writing memoir didn't feel that different in that way, but it has felt very intimate and personal having people read sort of my own life
Yeah.
story. And so I do think the next book I write under my own name is probably going to be another fantasy novel because I do like having that little scrim of fiction between
Yeah.
myself.
But you'll wind up in it anyway.
Right, this is the thing, it's about me anyway, so yeah. I think it's always right, any art is, yeah, so
Well, we're so glad to talk to you, Betsy Cornwell. Her memoir, Ring of Salt. And was there a question that you?
no.
Oh, great.
You covered it all.
And I'm so glad that we could talk to you. Thank you, and to you and your son and your extended family. Happy holidays, and thanks for joining us so late.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much, Scott, it was a real pleasure to talk to you, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care. On our open book tomorrow, I think we're going to have a reading of B. Wilson. I read a piece she wrote in the London Review of Books today about Judy Garland,
Hmm,
and I think we'll read from that. B has of course done the Heart Shaped Tin, which is a great book. We interviewed her on our show
what
a few weeks ago. So thanks very much. See you later. Good night, everyone.